everybody. I'm here again with Abdel and Trevor. And today we're gonna talk about how can you recognize a good breathwork coach? How can you find one? What are attributes that you would look for in a good coach, or maybe things that you really might not want in a coach? And also related to that, basically, if you're in the position of being a sitter for someone else, what are the things you want to kind of try and embody and keep in mind?
Yeah, it's interesting and sometimes a little bit difficult topic how do you find good people in general for anything really. When I started, I didn't know anybody when I started in the space, so and that might be the case for some people. So then I actually went with intuition. So I looked up a few organizations. I filtered to the ones that I found to be to I don't know suit me more, and then within that organization I picked people based on this funny thing called photo reading. Basically just try to get a feeling from looking at somebody's face, and sometimes there's a little bit of their story, and you just get a feel for it, and once you get a good feeling, you're like, okay, that's going to be this person, it's all good.
Oh no, this is gonna be the most esoteric video so far. But anyways,
it,
that's
it's
good.
it's like people like to think we do reasonable things all the time, but it's actually reasonable to use your intuition. Like that's the that's the majority of your processing power to tell you what's happening around you. Happens in your intuition,
Yeah.
right? Um, so if you want to not make it too woo, right? Like intuition can be used to make good decisions if you train yourself to communicate with it uh, in a productive way, right?
Yes.
To your benefit, um, right?
Now, obviously, when you start breathwork, you might not be that connected to your intuition yet, depending on where you're starting, right? But
We
yes, I
all
agree,
have
actually,
we all
right?
have intuition on people.
Yes, no, I
That's
agree, actually.
highly trained. You get a feeling about people, like in 2 seconds when you meet somebody. In 2 seconds, you have a feeling. The rest is just getting confirmation with words and things.
No, I would definitely agree with this. That's also what people say about therapists. Finding a good therapist, you want to find the click, right? Doesn't even mean
Yeah.
that the other ones are bad, but you definitely want to find a click.
Yes.
But as always, I will take it back from the practical into the sort of, more sort of principle realm. Um, for me, I think the two things I would look for in a guide, and again, it also really depends on, what your personal preferences are. But the two things I really care about is, first of all, someone who's grounded, because also like some of these things you only find out once you've done a session with them, but some of the things you also already see from how they talk. So that they can ground, for example, big emotions, that they can be really okay, like not dramatic, not anything, with like big life topics, basically, right? And for me also, that includes sort of having a certain realism, right? So if I see websites where people talk about like 10 different aura colors and stuff, I'd be like, man, I don't know if you can ground my emotions if I need it, right? That's, for me, that would be not the right thing, but for others it can be, of course, right? But so for me, it would be a certain groundedness, a certain realism of like, okay, we can take on big life topics together, and I'm not going to be phased, and I'm not going to like go into like weird interpretations. I'm just going to be there. I'm going to hold space, right? So certain sort of robustness that I think for me would be important. And the other thing is someone who doesn't define or direct your experience. So for me, that's a huge topic, I would say. I think people who immediately go like, oh, like you remember the story from your childhood, this is what it means, for example, right? Or I remember having a session with someone who kept telling me to open my mouth while breathing, right? And generally, I would agree with that. I think it's good to breathe through your mouth when you're doing breath work. But in that moment, I was actually in a flashback to a childhood memory, and it was incredibly distracting. And this is one of those examples where I feel like less direction would have been better. So for me, that would be something else I would look for, someone who doesn't direct the experience unless it's absolutely necessary.
I think you both bring up some amazing points there, and I love the point of we just finding the right person, whether it's a therapist or a breathwork practitioner or a job even, like in all aspects of our life, it's like following intuition. And I mean, that's why there's so many coaches and so many therapists and so many people, because what works for me doesn't work for you, and what works for you doesn't work for other people. And the breathwork is becoming kind of like a trendy new hot topic out there. So there's going to be endless breathwork coaches. And I mean, even on my social feeds now, it's just become a breathwork practititioner, become this. And it's just like, there's so many people out there that can do it. So yeah, it's just choosing, what speaks to you and what works for you. And with that, there is like a dozen breathwork practices, Wim Hof, connected breath, holotropic. There's just like an unbelievable amount. So it's like finding the right one that mixes the music that you like with the breathing patterns you like, to like, because Wim Hof, like you said, Wim Hof is like, breathe, motherfucker, like it's like super intense. And for, males and men or masculine centered people that have that kind of energy behind them, it's like they need to be told that. They need to be told, like, breathe as hard as you can and like hold it and discomfort. And you're like, oh, I'm a man, and like it's such an energy charge that like it speaks to a lot of people, including myself. So I think it's great. But I mean, following intuition, going with what you like, learning what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work. I mean, whenever I see a new breath video on YouTube, because I search them all the time, but whenever there's a new music mix or a new breathwork guy that's coming up being like, hey, check my stuff, I always love checking out, because you never know when you're going to find the next best breathwork session. And there's a couple of guys out there that I draw tons of inspiration from for my own facilitation and breathwork, just from watching their YouTube videos. And yeah, so I think it's like sit in on some sessions. We have a beautiful free breathwork community for now, self breathwork. So come join, check out what we do, take what you like. I mean, there's a couple of different modalities in the group. When you join, there's some Soma work, there's some Wim Hof work, there's my own personal work, which is like an amalgamation of a dozen different breathworks. And it's like, you just take from it what you like. And, within that, there's about 100 people now. So somebody can point you in the right direction of where to go and where to get some good quality practices in.
Absolutely. And I think that's also important, is to not be afraid of trying, right? So the session that I just mentioned, where someone directed me a bit too much, like I'm saying it now as, like I wouldn't necessarily want to do that again another 10 times, but that was incredibly helpful for me to feel, actually, to go like, oh, okay, there was a boundary that I didn't protect, right? So even the sessions that, are not ideal, whatever that means, can be incredibly educational, and they teach you something about yourself. And then maybe you say, okay, I don't need to do this again, I would like to do something else. And then you try different things. I think that's also really important, to just go at it in a sort of slightly playful way.
And that's also a great opportunity to offer feedback to a practitioner that you do want to work with, because the more we work together, I mean, we have a group that breathes together almost every day to every 2 to 3 days, but I mean, it's a very, very similar amount of people. So, when I'm running sessions, I receive feedback. It's like, hey, I don't like it when you talk so much. That just gives me a sign of where to go when I'm working with a certain person, which I think is also a beautiful opportunity to practice, like you said, our boundaries, our truth, what we want to get into. So, just because there's one aspect of something you don't like don't cancel culture it and be like, nope, never going back to this guy, but maybe it's an opportunity for growth on both ends.
That's maybe also a good point, is I think one of the obvious signs of a good guide is that they take on board feedback, and then they might actually ask you for it actively, right? Because indeed, every person is different. And I know quite a few of my fellow coaches, for example, just make this a habit of asking at the end of the session, was there anything for you that didn't feel right? Because you always want to learn, and you always want to tune in more for everyone also, right?
Yeah, and one sign, I mean, that I think Martha mentioned it a little bit. I wanted to build on that, is after you have a session with someone, if you're thinking about them, something didn't go right. Right?
That's nice, actually.
Right? Because if you're thinking, oh, this guy was so good, something didn't go right. If you're feeling your feelings, if you can look inward, if you're in your process, you had a good session. it's not necessarily always that it should be the case. Indeed, if you're doing Wim Hof and somebody is going like, okay, take the pain, take the more pain. Okay, when you really feel you must breathe, we're gonna count 20, right? But in general, when you want to go to a vulnerable place, then a good facilitator makes space for you, for your experience, but they're not part of it, right?
Very well said.
Yeah, exactly. So you want them to kind of be the canvas, but if they become kind of the center of the session, then exactly, it doesn't even matter negative or positive, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go like,
Mhm.
that was horrible or that was great, that should not be the main point. Yeah.
If a facilitator or somebody who wants to do that kind of work is listening to this, the way that you make space is by having your own shit sorted, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you resonate with somebody, if somebody is sad, and you start resonating with them, your emotions start to bubble up, you just didn't do enough work on yourself before you try to help someone else.
Hmm.
It's a bit more of a harsh thing to say, but it's also true. So
I mean, I would say it more gently, but but I think the substance of it wouldn't be that different in the sense that I've seen that people say like that facilitators really want to take themselves out of the process, which I think is a good thing, but they can't because what you haven't addressed flows out, right? So it's not necessary that people are not wanting to hold space for you, but if there's a lot of unresolved stuff, you cannot because it will flow out somehow, right? Somewhere, somehow there will be like emotional contagion, you can call it, right? And so that's just a matter of keeping doing your work, your own work, right? I think as a facilitator, that's the number one thing is like keep doing your own work. That's the best you can do for your clients.
And especially in the space that we're in like personal development and looking at your own stuff as a leader facilitator, I think it's utmost important that leader, like I will not follow someone that's not immersed in their work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not following someone that has all the answers. Like that's my boundary of like, if you think and you don't have a community to hold you accountable, or you don't make room for feedback, like that's a hard line for me, because I think that's a very dangerous territory to be in.
That's actually a good point, and that maybe also goes into this. So one of the reasons why I, for example, don't do this as my day job, right, is because I'm glad that I have another job where I constantly fail. So that you get feedback on what you can still improve on, not just in the work, but as a person. And it's nice, sometimes I think that's the fallacy of the guru, right, is that you have a lot of people who are incredibly thankful to you because yes, they are getting better, because as Abdel also said, a lot of these breathing techniques stand by themselves a lot, right? Like if you do breath work, most likely something good will happen regardless of the coach, right? So it's really easy to get mostly positive feedback and to go like, oh, this is going great. And I think that it's really important that a facilitator kind of goes, okay, what's still left to do for me, right? There's still gonna be stuff.
They wear it as a badge of like, look at what I'm doing. Like I'm doing all of this. And then, it's crazy.
Yeah. And so I think that's actually a really important thing to look out for in terms of who you maybe don't want you to guide you. Is you want to look if someone is still really hungry to develop for themselves or not.
And I also think it's important that I'm not sure if we touch on this too much, but just like making space at the end of the session for people to share, because having a challenging experience and then being like, thanks a lot, see you guys later. I just did that in the last session, and I have to go back and follow up with some people. But like, because when you're in a breath session, then you're like, holy shit, I don't know what just happened, and then it can be very isolating if you're not given that space to be like, hey, was that normal or okay that I feel like bawling my eyes out when this happens? Like that can be people can hold a lot of shame around that. So I think it's important to hold space.
Yes, and exactly. And also, like, sometimes you also have to do that for people then, not just in a session, but even in everyday life. So I've also seen some sessions where people actually have a really beautiful experience, but then they go back into their normal life and go like, oh my God, everything is so alienating, right? And people people don't truly talk to each other and stuff. And that can also be hard to deal with then. And so a really good guide would probably also want to help a little bit with those kinds of clashes, right? So not just in the session, but also how that integrates in your life.
There's always a parallel between breathwork and reality.
Yes. But sometimes it's hard to find on your own, right?
Absolutely.
I think those are the most important bits to look for in a guide, and also to try and embody. If you're a sitter, for example, this, holding space, keeping your own shit out of the equation, really having this, non-judgmental acceptance of the other person. I think those are the most important bits in general.
Cool.
Very nice. Right. So these are some of the things that might be interesting for you in looking for a guide that really fits you. I hope it was useful. And as always, if you have any questions or comments or things to add, you're very, very welcome to do that in the comments below. Always super interesting to see what you guys think. And hope to see you in one of the next videos. Happy breathing. Bye.